chapter clicked in to College Volleyball Weekly on Viral Volley Media. Now here's your host, Rob on mic.
Hey, good day, everyone. And we're going to jump into the nitty here because we just finished NCAA Championship Week. We crowned the 2023 national champion, and there's so much to talk about. And that's just the match stuff. There's so many other things I'd love to dive into, but we may have to explore doing a season review recap because there's just so much. But Brad Rothschild of UC San Diego, Jay Hosick of George Mason, who hosted a phenomenal event out of Fairfax, Virginia, Theo Edwards of CSUN, and Dan, friend of Lewis. Thanks for joining me this week. Like I said, we're going to jump right in. April 30th, opening round, match number 1, King from the Conference Carolinas versus Ohio State of the MIVA. Let's let Dan take the first stab at this, and being that that's his home conference team. We don't have Conference Carolina representation, so shoot away.
Well, credit to Booher and his guys. That game 3 was awesome, and it was a great way to kind of kick off the tournament. And certainly, I think, Ohio State kind of took care of business first couple games. I think King was competitive, had some opportunities, but unfortunately, we're a little bit overmatched. But you got to game 3, and you saw Davis, and that kid got some kills and found some angles, and they created some opportunities. They had a couple chances to push that to 4, and Birch's guys found a way to close it out. But I thought it really set the table for some great volleyball, and we saw some. It was, King deserved to be there. They created an opportunity and won their conference tournament, showcased what Brewer's doing with that group over the past, 10, 15 years. He's been doing some great things, and so just proud of those guys. And then certainly Birch and those guys hadn't been back in a few years, and Birch's first opportunity as a head coach, and they took care of business and put themselves on to the next round.
Let's jump to the West Side view of the situation of Brad Rothschild.
Yeah, set 3 might have been the most entertaining set of the whole entire tournament. You got set 3 and then set 1 in the Saturday night match. But it was so cool to see those guys battle, and just watching. It felt like the entire arena was pulling for King, and maybe even some of the Ohio State fans. And it was really cool to see just everyone rally around them and try to will them to that third set victory. And really, Jacob Pastor and the Buckeyes, Jacob was too good over time, and he was good on the BIC, he was good out of system, and he was great from the service line, which was a huge deciding piece in that match.
Yep. Back to the right side of the coast representation, Jay, since you were right there on the ESPN call.
Yeah, working it with you. I'll tell you what, here's the cool thing. There was nearly 2,000 people at that match. Yep. And that gym, holds 10,000 people. That gym in the lower bowl felt like there was a ton of people in there watching that game, and they were all excited to see it, play out the way it did. I think Dan was right. I think Ohio State was obviously the favorite. But don't tell that to King. Those kids came out swinging 38-36 in that set. That's unreal good. And Davis did a real nice job of bringing that team. But you could see that team was having fun the entire time. They earned their chance. They deserved to be there. And, overwhelming maybe at first for them. But after a little bit, they got into it. They were swinging pound for pound and doing what they could. And hats off to Brewer and his program. And I'm sure this will not be the last time we'll see King in that dance.
Yep. Back to the left coast. Theo.
Yeah, I think you guys hit it on the head. It was an awesome match. Obviously Ohio State was the better team and the victor of it, but to have a stage where you get to see a university like King compete against a school like Ohio State, take them into extra innings in the third set, and just like these guys said, just really prove that they belong there, and maybe have an opportunity to stretch that to a fourth, and it was just a lot of fun to watch. And Davis is awesome, man. And he lit it up in that third set. I think he hit close to 300 on the night, and just a really, really fun and a nice way to set off the tournament. So super exciting. And I got to give big props to Rob and Jay. I feel like these guys were calling that game and called a couple others, but man, you guys did a fantastic job, man. Way to represent the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, hey, Jay, you brought up 2000 opening night. I know there was about 8,500 in the finals plus closer at. What was the total overall attendance for all the rounds?
I don't have the exact number, but if you figure 2,000 or so the first night, we had around 7,000 the last night. We probably had 5,000 in between. I'd say we probably got somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 or so.
Right. It'd be an interesting, I'd like to compare that metric to last year and where those guys are at over all the rounds combined. You know what I mean? In terms of that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I certainly think that final was rocking. I was in there with you guys and lots of people, almost all the lower bowl full and the upper bowl was almost 2/3 to 3/4 full, which was pretty neat. So
yeah, I'd say we were easily up in that range. And just to give you a little perspective, in Hawaii, I'm sorry, not Hawaii, but UCLA last year, over the final match attendance was 5,700. We had 7,000 in ours. And UCLA was at home when that happened. I mean, not at home, but they were hosting on the West Coast. Obviously, Long Beach is right down the street. We felt pretty good about that performance. So super excited just to be able to host it and put on a big party for everybody. It was a good time.
Yep. I wanted to bring up maybe three things, but hadn't seen Jacob Pasture play in person or Shane Wetzel of Ohio State. And I'm telling you, that's some good talent that Birch has got. Pasture, what an arm. I mean, that is one strong dude. And I have to say, he did not disappoint. Same thing with Wetzel. I know there towards the end, there is some little freshman errors, like a foot fault. Well, that's actually in the later matches, but I'll stop there. But, in talking to Ryan Boer, the head coach of King, I did not realize that at one point in the season, and the story that sticks out is what a program like that has to go to play teams. They play 4 matches in a row, traveling on buses for 6 to 10 hours, maybe less than 24 hours of rest. And having to put out different teams out there just to make sure he has a healthy lineup out on the court. But I'm thinking if he could spread that out, would his record be different? Because he had some tough matches in that stretch that he's describing. He had I think you guys, right, Dan, Lewis,
Yeah.
and Loyola, like back-to-back nights in less than 16 hours, and he had some injuries to deal with. But they were 4 back-to-back nights with solid travel that weren't cheap. That included a 10-hour bus ride to a certain airport to get to another place, and I mean, it just sounded like a mess. But they still competed on the season, which I was so impressed with, because they end the season this way. Hats off to Coach Boer. But I'm not going to throw any Ohio State fans under the bus, but they came up afterwards and we are rooting for King in the third set. We wanted to see more volleyball because they said that Boer King's got a middle, Kennedy, Kellen Kennedy, who was such a physical beast in the middle. It shows he hit 452, but he was creating so many problems for Ohio State because he just was firing up the team. You could see at the tail end of the second and the third set. And you could see it would have been a Hoosiers type story in there, because everyone's like, my gosh, his King team is playing awesome. But it was so entertaining to watch courtside and call it as well. So any other closing thoughts on the opening round first match? We good? All right. Now, May 2nd. Actually, we should talk about the result. Ohio State wins 3-0 over King University of Conference Carolinas, 25-20, 25-16, 36-34 in the third set winner. So again, a lot of extra volleyball, which was so awesome to see. And then on Tuesday night, May 2nd, you had opening round match number 2 between Long Beach State and Grand Canyon, and opening match number 3, Penn State and Ohio State. Let's start with Long Beach State and GCU. Let's have Theo start this one out.
Yeah, that was a fun one. I think those two teams were incredibly evenly matched to a certain extent. And, to see Long Beach obviously pull it out, I thought they were a little bit cleaner, a little bit sharper through the stretch. And, Grand Canyon, although I feel like they had all year, they had a really fast offense and incredibly effective. It seemed like things were a little off that night. Christian Janke, a guy who has been incredibly steady for them and has had some incredible numbers for his career and has done a fantastic job. He hit 185. And, for that team, I think that guy's got to be a 250 or above type of production for them. And, where on the flip side, Jackson Hickman, 321 on 28 swings. And then Camden Gianni, if he didn't run out of steam, I mean, there was a point in the match where he just seemed like he could not be stopped. I mean, he was absolutely hammering the ball. But I give my credit to Long Beach. I thought they did a fantastic job dealing with it. Simon Torwey was ridiculous. He hit like 909 on 11 swings, 10 for 11, no errors. I mean, he was absolutely unbelievable. And then Spencer Olivier, I thought towards the end of this season, and obviously the end of his career, I thought he's played really, really well, hit 385 on 26 swings. And I felt like they were a little bit crisper from a passing perspective, a little bit better from the service line, and caused Grand Canyon to be in some tough situations, and they ended up pulling it out. So a really exciting match. Obviously it went 4, and I felt like that fourth one could have easily gone to Grand Canyon. They made a couple of mistakes and, ended up losing that, but that was 25-23. And just overall a really, really good match. And again, kind of another nice opener to the tournament.
Yep. Let's go over to Jay for the Right Coast view.
What I saw over the course of the year, and I think everybody understood this, Grand Canyon was lightning fast to the pins all year long. That was part, and for the BIC, that was part of their moniker. If you were not prepared to have to make quick decisions and move quickly pin to pin, you were going to be in some pretty bad spots with them. And Long Beach, even when their in system is not terribly fast, and I think Alan would say that as well, that they were not known for being super lightning fast to the pins, but their hitters were very adept at taking those balls at a high point, and finding the court in some special way. And their out of system stuff, they're so used to being slower, half the game's out of system. So for them, their hitters were able to beat them out of a lot of situations. I think over the course of that match, you saw Grand Canyon's passing and in system receive get broken down. And when they are in system, they were deadly. When they were out of system, they were missing a couple of beats, and Long Beach capitalized on that. And I think to me, that was the crux of the match, is if Grand Canyon could stay in system, they could run fast. Hey, Long Beach was just hoping they could hang on and slow some things down and keep up with them. But Long Beach was so good out of system, and it wore them down. And that to me was the match.
Yep. Back to the left coast view, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, we had some really good middles in this matchup. You got Holdaway, you got Torwey, and then Rico Wardlow, who had himself a heck of a night. And I thought the difference was Long Beach's serve receive. And that was a big piece. Obviously, they've been held down by Mason Briggs. I think he was in system like 80% of the time on 20 balls, which is pretty ridiculous number to be at. And that was kind of the difference. Grand Canyon was an elite serving team for a large majority of the year, and just not being able to get any points from the service line with any aces like they were used to, that makes a difference in those 22, 25 sets, 23, 25 sets to help them win. And then like on top of that, you got Spencer Olivier, Mason Briggs, 11 digs each, which is another really formidable stat line from them. So I think Long Beach being a little more consistent from the service line, and they've been all year, they've been serving in and playing really steady block defense, was the huge difference that gave them the edge in this really closely contested match with Grand Canyon.
All right, go back over to Dan.
Yeah, I'll probably piggyback with what all these guys said. I think the defensive side really showed in the medium system for Long Beach. Like they had almost double the blocks. Torrey had 8. It was 21-11. They beat him in digs by about 6. And Brad just mentioned the two guys. I think that was the big piece, a little bit of breakdown in serve receive, and then really capitalize on some opportunities Long Beach did and put themselves in a position to win that match. And certainly it was really, really good volleyball. It was fun to watch. So, and you guys did a great job announcing again, just so you know. So it was really, really good. So,
well, personally, I was looking forward to this because I believe, according to the press notes, the last time they matched up was 2019 or 2018, one of those 2 years. And they scrimmaged in the fall, but everyone knows everyone's just kind of playing around with their lineups in the fall, so that didn't count. So head-to-head, high-octane offenses going at it with some pretty good defense to boot. So, but one of the adjustments that was made, and I couldn't exactly make out why, and wanted to ask you guys, Cameron Thorne had been starting in the middle for GCU, and then I guess Worley put in Colin Lovejoy, and I was like, you know what? But he'd been pretty. Thorne had been pretty consistent through the season, but I wasn't seeing anything that would have him pulled. But then again, he was getting some good results. It was a timely pull or a replacement or substitution. But I'm curious if you guys saw anything that, us non-volumetric type people would justify, or not justify, because I mean, it was a great move, but I wanted to see what you guys thought.
Well, at the start of the year, Lovejoy was their starting middle, and I think he's a senior, he's a junior, he's an older guy. And then he broke his hand or something got jacked up with his hand or thumb. Somewhere around the end of January, he was out. So I'm assuming it was more him just getting healthy and probably had a good week of training and probably wanted to go with the older guy. But that's just my thought from what I saw early on with them.
Yep.
Sometimes though, you got to realize, like, and this is nothing against Cameron Thorne or anything. Like, if you're looking for a little bit of a spark and maybe he's not playing at the same level you've seen him play, because he ended with no blocks and he hit 0-0-0. So you're like, hey, where can I make this slight move that might create some energy, might get and certainly an older, middle like Colin pops in there and maybe gets a couple touches, turns a few points, creates some stuff. And so it's certainly, and I'm not in Worley's head, but as an outside piece, I'm like, I was just making this shift to kind of see, hey, to just make a change a little bit. Shoot, you saw the middle change at UCLA. That was a pretty good change there too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
All right. Any other thoughts about the Grand Canyon Long Beach State high octane matchup? No. All right. Opening round match number 3. And just for you listeners and viewers, I'm using the term opening round match because from my understanding, those first few rounds aren't looked at as part of the NCAA tournament. And I was just asking about the seeds. Why weren't the seeds on the bracket, like on the published bracket? Because it's not officially recognized as part of the NCAA tournament. And that's another discussion for later. Because I was corrected many times. Like, no, this is the NCAA tournament. No, this is the opening round matchup. Like, what? So that brings us to opening round match number 3. And this was another great matchup. Penn State versus Ohio State. We'll go with Jay's home conference representation there, and then we'll go back and forth again. So, Jay, thoughts on the match?
It was a battle of two opposites, and one is a fifth-year senior, and the other one is a true freshman. Those two kids were just going toe-to-toe, and unfortunately, it did not go Ohio State's way, but it wasn't because Penn State was just light years better. It was just a few points at the right time, and it was a lot of fun to watch. Cal Fisher showed the rest of the country that a 6'2", 6'3" opposite could really do some damage. Wildman was good, obviously, and Bogner runs just a really good offense. But Ohio State looked just a hair slower and gave maybe Penn State a little bit more time to get in front. But Pastor was lighting people up, and he had a couple 77-mile-an-hour bombs on the service line. That's just ridiculous. And I was telling everybody on the broadcast, and I'll mention it here for those that didn't catch it. If you see somebody serving in the 65 to 70-mile-an-hour range, that's like throwing a 95-mile-an-hour to 100-mile-an-hour pitch in baseball. It's ridiculously fast. These guys are hitting 72, 74, 77. That's like facing 105-mile-an-hour, 106-mile-an-hour pitch in baseball. That's dumb. No, not many people are doing that at this level. And Pastor's doing it and hitting it with consistency. And Wildman was doing it a couple of times. And it's really fun to watch. And when you see it live, like it sounds different and it just looks different. And these passers have got to make lightning quick decisions. And they did a nice job all night long on both sides.
All right, let's bounce over to Theo on the Penn State-Ohio State matchup.
Yeah, I think, and I want to kind of reiterate some of the stuff that Jay's talking about. I mean, these serves and some of the speeds that the radar gun is picking up, you go back 10 years ago, and this was unheard of in the college game. I mean, absolutely unheard of. And obviously, at the international level, we saw servers doing this. We saw the Clay Stanleys of the world starting to hit that 70-mile-per-hour range and getting in there pretty consistently. But the college kids were never at that level. And now you're starting to see multiple guys around the country in multiple conferences that can do it and can do it on a regular basis, 71, 72. And then the 76s, which is just like Jay said, it's unheard of. It's unheard of to hit the ball that fast. But man, yeah, I think back to this match between Ohio State and Penn State. This was a fantastic matchup, and I think if Jacob Pastor doesn't run out of gas, maybe this goes a little bit further and stretches down the distance. Pastor had 46 swings, 16 kills. He only hit 43 for them. And I think that in order for them to beat a team like Penn State, who was just absolutely electric from the pins and, high volume, Bogner did just a fantastic job. And then similar to what Jay was talking about, the opposites, Cal Fisher, Jesus. 533 on 30 swings. He was just unstoppable, 18 kills and only 2 errors, which is just absolutely unheard of. And then Shane Wetzel, he hit 484 on 31 swings and only had 5 errors. Just some really, really high level volleyball. And, when you look at the box score, Ohio State did a fantastic job on defense at 41 digs and kind of outdug them. But Penn State did a fantastic job blocking. And I really feel like, when you look at the matchups and you see what coaches are doing, they obviously strategized against Pastor and they put a ton of hands in front of him and effectively were able to slow him down and win that match.
Great call. Jump over to Dan, representing the MIVA, but I'd say he'll only get to see Shane Wetzel for 3 more years. And it's a good piece that I'm sure Lewis is looking forward to adjust to.
Yeah. Well, Theo did a nice job. He almost covered everything. So, I think he brought up the blocking. I think Penn State had 26, 28. 26 blocks to Ohio State's 8. That's a pretty big stat line difference. And really, Stevens was negative, Pasteur was 0-4-3, and so they really kind of shut down the front pin. And then you had a couple of deuce games there. So I think, I think we could have been in store for some better volleyball. And it's interesting, though, we talked about in this medium system where Grand Canyon got caught in the medium system and wasn't great. Then you see Ohio State, they kind of got caught in this medium system because of all the serving pressure, and they weren't as good, except for, Shane was still pretty good. You didn't see a ton of middle action, like Cole Young hit 700 for 7 for 10, and both Penn State's middles didn't get a lot of attempts. It was like 6 total between the two in terms of that. So you saw a lot of volleyball being played in medium system, and Penn State just did a better job in terms of executing that from that standpoint. So you coaches out there, train medium system, got to be really good at it. I think it's pretty key. Do you know what I mean? So
there's your free tip from Dan, friend of Lewis there. All right, close that with Brad.
Yeah, building off Dan's thought. If you look at Penn State's offense, they had 8 errors, and looks like 7 of them were blocks, and there was 1 true hitting error. So Cal Fisher either hit a ball into the net or into the 10 or out long. But 1 hitting error throughout the course of a match is pretty unreal. And given the pace that Ohio State was bringing, and they were bringing it from the end line, and they erred about 25% of the time. So to be able to manage that and fight that off with such a clean offensive hitting efficiency is rather impressive, and that's a testament to Bogner being one of the better setters in the country, along with the 2 guys we saw play on Saturday night.
Yep. Great call. The results of that match show 3-1 Penn State or Ohio State, 25-22, 24-26, 25-13, and 26-24. So, but yeah, definitely some really great, it's a great showcase of opposites, but in seeing how a team like Penn State did make those adjustments against past year, because we knew they were going to go to him. And he had the hot hand coming into that night, and they did a pretty effective job. But I wanted to shout out to Brett Wildman and Michal Koval. Sometimes they get overlooked, but they were performing well. Koval, not as many kills, but he hit 500 on the night. But it's things that he does, that chasing down balls, and was able to keep Ohio State, or actually Penn State, in system, and Wildman just cracking it. He's such a tough athlete to adjust to as well. So Penn State's got a lot of good weapons, and good match to see. I'm going to jump to Wednesday night. Oop.
Interesting thing, though, as watching, Wildman didn't have a great year like the first half of the season. And I think the last 2 weeks, conference tournament included, going into the NCAA tournament, we all saw Wildman play the level that he's capable of playing, which was really great for fans because, like you just said, the guy's got an arm, and we really saw him, I think, really step it up, which was great.
Yeah. Well, good. That brings us to Wednesday night. Was normally the All-American banquet, and I know that there were some criticisms of like it being downgraded to All-American reception, and then it became a social. But it was held at, I mean, this sounds weird, a Dave and Buster's. But if you were there, you can see everyone had a good time. You could see the athletes going into the arcade, playing games, hanging out. There's Champlin doing this reflex machine, and you can see Olivier wanting to walk up and challenge. I mean, the competition between these guys is hilarious, but isn't good fun. But it just created a great atmosphere for an event. So when we finally had everyone to sit down to talk about the winners, were you had the assistant coach of the year, Milan Zarkovic of Hawaii, and then we mentioned Spra as the head coach of the year, and had a very heartfelt speech to everyone there because I mean he knows that his family's been having to grind this out, and anyone knows Spra's family situation. He's basically taking the train to UCLA every day, and because he lives in California, it's like probably 60 miles. But you factor in traffic, what should only be an hour and a half commute turns into a 3-hour commute, both there and back. And he's been doing that. And he's saying it's like we've been working hard. Support of the family has been crucial. And then, just was very thankful to his wife, Michelle, and seeing the girls there as well. And then you had a surprise appearance by Hostas Theoharidis. I guess he's from the East Coast area, former All-American at University of Hawaii. Came in and was hanging out with a crew there. And then the announced retirement of Kathy DeBoer, the AVCA, after, gosh, how many years is it, Dan, that she's been serving there?
In the 20s, maybe 20
Yeah.
years, give or take. So
yeah, she'd mentioned this is the last year, and I just want to thank her for her contribution. She's presenting the awards for the last time, and pretty funny because the moment of the night, Jalen Jasper gets his award, and Jalen Jasper is a big dude, right? So he's wearing a jacket that says Playboy. And you see Kathy DeBoer lean into the Playboy logo on the side of his arm, and people shooting the shot. So
17 years, just so you know, 17 years.
Yeah.
17.
So it's a funny moment, and everyone caught that. I'm like, oh gosh, if that goes viral, that's gonna be hilarious. And then who am I missing? The player of the year, Jakob Tella of Hawaii. And gosh, I feel like I'm missing another big piece there. But
Freshman of the year, Rowan.
Yeah.
Yes, fresh, yeah. And I mean, talk about well, first of all, Jakob Tella, great career at Hawaii. And we know he started off the season a little injured and didn't even start some matches, but came back, made a big, strong push towards, for the rest of the season when he came back. And then Rowan, everyone knows Rowan. We'll talk about him because we still have one more big match to talk about, or actually a couple more. So, but that was a night, it was a fun night, and I think is very well received. Has done good considering, like, you think Dave and Buster's, if you guys know, it's like, oh, let's just all hang around, but it was a good night. And I think that people really enjoyed it, and seeing the athletes engage and just interact in a very social scene was fun to see.
I'll be honest with you. I was not there. I had some prior engagements to be a part of, and listen, it's an All-American banquet celebration, and I wasn't being awarded or anything, and none of my guys were, so I didn't feel that there was a need. It wasn't like I was just going out with my friends. But I will tell you this: at first, there were some concerns. People said, Dave and Buster's, what are we doing? We're having it at a pizza joint. It's like a Chuck E. Cheese. Everybody thought it was going to be Chuck E. Cheese. First of all, Dave and Buster's is not a bad place to hang out, even for adults, and that's kind of fun. Second of all, they closed the whole place down. It wasn't like there were kids screaming and yelling down on the other side of the place, and we had a little corner saved for us. I've been to some of these things in the past, and some of them are held in little banquet halls, and others are held in an entryway of a gym, and kind of there's all these different areas and locations. This one, from everything I've heard from everybody who attended, said it was a blast. And you're right, all the kids got to hang out. They're all uber competitive as it is, and all of them know each other to some degree. So they're all now running around with these free gift cards, and they're all swiping and playing games, having a blast. That's what the whole thing is about, recognizing the best and having fun while you're doing it. Can't complain with that.
Good call. And any thoughts on the All-America banquet from the rest of the crew?
Yeah, I was there. All I would say is like post-COVID, I'm just glad we're back to doing stuff. So I think sometimes we forget about that. And I've been at every single championship the past 10 years almost, you know what I mean? And so like, so whether it was Dave and Buster's, whatever, Mason, as again, I'll probably say later, did a fantastic job with this event, as well with the banquet. And the guys had a good time. And I think every different place can create some unique culture, whether it's a full-blown banquet, whether UCLA did the kind of the hors d'oeuvres appetizer thing, and it was outside, which was really cool in terms of that. And so I think everybody kind of puts their own little flair on it. So, and it was great to see the guys be able to get their awards and get honored. So,
yeah. Well, that's right, because last year UCLA got to host or MC that, and they're definitely, because it's coming out of COVID, there was an element of like still people being a little, wanting to maintain distance a little bit. Really felt like that wasn't there this time around, and it was so pleasant. It's very noticeable. I'm not saying everyone was freaking out last year at UCLA, but you could tell people were just cautious. And when they warmed up, finally, you could tell the mood, the atmosphere started to change at UCLA. But here, it wasn't there. Everyone just kind of hanging out. So. But that brings us to our Thursday matches. Semifinal number 1, UCLA versus Long Beach State. Well, we don't have an MPSF representative, and that's been Theo's been the nominee for that. So let's have him start first.
Yeah, I think it's wait, it's Brad's turn to start first, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, let's see what Brad's got. So we'll let him have the first shake at it.
All right, we can take it off. I mean, it was a highlight of kind of the 2 question marks. I put them in quotations because I think for some people, they're not necessarily question marks, but this was a highlight of, hey, what was Andrew Rowan going to be able to do? And how is he going to be able to perform in this stage, in this moment, as a true freshman, as the freshman of the year? And his team hit 446. So I think he did just fine. I think he checked out there. And then the other really big question mark with UCLA kind of through the years and this year, especially with how well-rounded they were, was their serving. And they served in at an incredible rate. They served in at 91%, which is pretty ridiculous. And that's up there for about as good as it's going to get for a team and for the pace that they were putting on those balls. And they kind of answered both those bells. And it was a pretty dominating performance against a really good Long Beach State team that they just continued to handle them. And, there would be runs from Long Beach, whether it be Connor Bloom from the end line or Torwey from the end line. There'd be different runs that would come, and UCLA would answer the bell and answer the bell and answer the bell. And a lot of it was showcased by Andrew Rowan and his performance he put on, and specifically setting the pin hitters, who I think all 3 of them hit right around 500, if not a little bit above 500. So yeah, Rowan and UCLA serving were great.
Yep. Just bounce over to Dan.
Yeah. So I think Long Beach, unfortunately, I don't know that we saw the best Long Beach team that, especially compared to the other night on Tuesday. Clark hit 0.59, and granted, kudos to UCLA. They created the pressure from that standpoint and what they were doing, but I've certainly seen them be a little bit better. And so I think that's, we walk into this format a little bit where, you come in and you like, if we do get to expand the bracket and you get 2 separate weekends, maybe your volleyball becomes a little fresher. That's not excuses or anything, but if Ohio State somehow would have squeaked out of that Penn State match, I don't think they would have had a whole lot left in the tank on the 3rd match in like 3 or 4 days in terms of that. But yeah, I think UCLA was great. They really kind of set the bar on the serving piece, and which you knew was going to walk into their finals match, and you need Long Beach to be a little bit cleaner in that serve pass area for sure, from their standpoint. So yeah.
All right, now we bounce over to Theo.
Yeah, I mean, I think we heard Speraw talk about this a little bit, but it can be a challenge having a bye and coming into a match when the other team has had a little bit of a warm up and had an opportunity to kind of see some things, make some mistakes, take jitters out, whatever it may be. And UCLA had no problem. They came right out of the gate, and I thought they played incredibly well in that first set. And of all of the matches that were played in this tournament, this was probably the only one that wasn't close. UCLA really handled Long Beach. And I agree with Dan. I don't know that we saw the best version of Long Beach, especially down the stretch. Even in that match against Grand Canyon, there were some things that just looked off about them. But for sure in this one, the pressure got to them, and you just saw some really uncharacteristic, like not going for a cover and things that just this Long Beach team really didn't do throughout this season. They were pretty darn crisp and pretty clean in the way that they played. And Clark Gobbled has been the heart and soul for them, especially down the stretch. And, UCLA took him out of the game and really put him in a box and made it incredibly difficult for him to score points. And, that ended up being really the game changer. UCLA won the serve and pass game, and David really was ridiculous. And he was ridiculous all tournament long, but in this match, 24 swings, 17 kills, hit 625, and just made it look so damn easy while he was doing it. I mean, it was really, really impressive. And this UCLA team, as we know, the future results of how this went down, they showed in this match that they were the real deal, and that this was going to be a great tournament for them.
Theo, you realize that Ito David was sick that night.
Was he really?
Yep.
If that's what sick looks like, I'll take a lot of illness for the rest of my life, please.
Yeah, in there when they were going up to the bracket board to put up the moving on ceremony that they do afterwards, Speraw was saying, we give this honor to David, who was sick as a dog this morning and came out and did what he did tonight. So
I was wondering what he was talking about. That makes a hell of a lot more sense. Wow. Impressive.
Not sick like in a millennial term, like, dude, bro, you're sick. He was sick. Let's close it out with Jay.
I'll be real brief because I know we're hampered by time. Two things ring true for me. One, everyone's right. That was not Long Beach's best match of the year by a long shot. Number two, they just looked off communication wise and tempo wise. Saturday hitter combinations all night. They didn't look like themselves. Unfortunately for them, UCLA capitalized on it. Moving on.
All right. So with that brings us to semifinal match number 2, Hawaii versus Penn State. Brad, our resident Big West dude on it.
This was a dogfight, and these teams were very, very evenly matched. You look at the numbers, you look at the stats, you watch it, and it could have gone either way. And I think this was going into it, the match that everyone was really intrigued to see how it would play out. And it played out exactly how you would expect, with a 5-set battle, and Hawaii being a little bit more experienced, a little better. And Jakob Tella and Muklius kind of were the difference in that 5th set for them. And they were just a little bit better than Wildman and Fisher and Bogner in that 5th set. So it was a battle, that's for sure. That was an entertaining volleyball match.
Yep. Go over to Dan of Lewis.
But we were talking in the previous round where Penn State made Brad, we said one hitting error that wasn't a block. And in this match, the errors kind of piled up a little bit. So they had 18 hitting errors, and I think Hawaii had about 15 blocks. And so I think there is certainly a different tale in terms of that side of things. But I still go back. You go to that 5th game, and Penn State finds a way to kind of create some serving momentum on the court versus in the net and missing, to start that match. I'm not even sure Cal's got to go at 100%. He could have kind of chopped one, spaced one, put some pressure on those guys. I think it might have swung some momentum on that. But, they missed. Him and Wildman both missed, and then the middles missed really bad. And so it didn't create that flow in that game you want to start off with. And so I think that made it pretty difficult. And then basically you hadn't seen a ton of middle from Hawaii until you got into that 5th set. And all of a sudden Jakob finds the middle, bang, 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 and the game's done. So miss serves, find the middle, Hawaii goes on to the next round. And so, but it was a great match. It was fun to watch. It was fun to see them come back, and the place was just rocking. You know what I mean? The Hawaii fans got silenced, and then all of a sudden they came alive. And I'm pretty sure Hawaii's band and fans are at least worth 1 or 2 points per game in that facility in terms of that. So,
all right, over to Theo.
Yeah, this was an exciting match for sure. Obviously a 5-setter, and I thought Hawaii came out of the gates absolutely playing great. And, you know, in comparison to their prior national championship teams, the drop off that happened after set 2, essentially 3 and 4, looked like a completely different Hawaii team. And you give credit to Penn State, but I thought Penn State was pretty consistent throughout this match. Set 1 was a little anomaly, but the rest of the match, they were 300 to 400 set to set, and which has kind of been their MO all year, where Hawaii had probably 2 of the worst sets I've seen them play all season. They hit 0-71 in set 3 and hit 143 in set 4, which just for them is really uncharacteristic. And, you know, they showed some flaws and showed some definite human attributes out there. Chakas just didn't look that sharp, was not himself. And I think for the Hawaii fans out there, I'm sure they were bummed and thinking, man, I wish that he would have the kind of night we would hope so. And where Voss was really, really good. And, you know, obviously Demi was fantastic throughout this entire tournament. But give my credit to Penn State. I thought they did a fantastic job. And I agree with Dan. I think they really could have snuck this one out. The 5th set, they started off a little shaky, and Hawaii found a way to kind of get it going and rob that momentum from them. But this was a good match. And, you know, obviously Hawaii pulls it out.
Yep. Close out with Jay.
Yeah, real quick. Again, I think Penn State in the 5th game resembled to me like what Long Beach looked like against UCLA. They just looked out of sorts and were not connecting. The service errors in the 5th game for Penn State were way too high. And normally in a match like that, they would not have missed that much, I don't think. The second thing for me is that Hawaii, Tella just found the right people at the right time, and they just looked way too good at that last moment. And give credit to Penn State, they fought tooth and nail all year long. But I heard a very good coach from a team that might have won, not necessarily the head, but somebody on staff who will remain nameless, who said to Pav afterwards, "You were more unlucky than you were bad." And that's just, I thought that was pretty appropriate for the moment. Penn State just hiccuped at the wrong moment. Who knows what could have happened.
Well, to say that there was some phenomenal effort displayed, and I'm only going to name 2 of them. You had Wildman going into the scores table, laying on the committee's lap. Literally, there's a photo of that courtside, but was going for a ball because it just refused to die, which was awesome to see. And less than a couple plays later, Bogner goes over the review challenge system, or closer to that area, because he won't let a ball die. So just a great display. Then Hawaii, you called it, the middles pop towards the end of that 5th set. I'm like, wow. Voss and Hoagland have just stepped up at the right times for Hawaii, which brings us to our final match. I hate to rush us through, but I definitely want to cover it. And number 1, UCLA, number 2, Hawaii, the matchup that every single poll, every single person was anticipating seeing, and it happened. So let's start with, let's go with Jay on this one.
Yeah, I'll be quick because I know the other guys have some insights and everybody's heard me on the broadcast. UCLA, Hawaii, best 2 teams in the country in the finals. Absolutely electric in the first 2 sets. That gym was rocking. I give all the credit to UCLA and J.R. Norris, the 4th. How about that kid coming in and having 5 aces and putting some pressure on Hawaii? But you could see Hawaii was trying to do things that they normally got away with, and UCLA was not having it. And they took it there at the end. Congratulations to UCLA, and congratulations to Hawaii. One match does not define how your season went. You guys played well the entire year and just came up a little bit short in one match at the end of the year, but both teams deserving. Hats off to UCLA. Congratulations to Hawaii. That's what I saw.
All right, over to Brad.
Yeah, I mean, the difference here was the serve receive passing. I mean, you have Champlin, who wasn't his traditional self offensively, but passed lights out. You had Gooch, who was probably the best libero, especially the best libero in serve receive all year long. And then Alex Knight, who was great in serve receive and maybe had the best match of his career in the biggest moment, which was pretty cool and pretty special to see. And they ended up being in system at 60%, and Hawaii was in system at 40%. And that's a huge difference in a match like that.
Yep. Let's go over to Dan.
Here's one for you. 50 attempts between, give or take 50 attempts between the 4 middles. Everybody's hitting 500 plus out of the middle. just middles were ridiculous. Like, and I think Brad said it. If you could pass better or set your middles, it was just a feast for those guys. Those guys were pretty fun to watch, and all those scenarios, and the setters were finding those guys. And props to I thought J.R. Norris could have been MVP, honestly. You know what I mean? So like, not that Alex Knight didn't deserve it from a passing standpoint, some things he did, but you talk about a guy who shifted some momentum and really closed it out at the end. That was pretty impressive. But maybe unsung hero, Gooch for Libero. Like, man, that guy was good. Like some digs and some servicey stuff, and Amoeba product. I'm going to throw some Amoeba love out there. Do anything for Wayne? And but yeah, congrats to UCLA, John and his group. I know he's been hunting for that for a while, and first championship there in 20 years or whatever. And so, but yeah, great volleyball for sure.
Norris gets the most outstanding celebration face of the year, because every time he got set by Rowan and put it away, he puts a stank face, points at Rowan, and it looks so gangsta. But it's hilarious to watch courtside. And I caught it a couple times during the season. But I mean, that guy is just such a spark plug off the bench. But let's jump over to Theo.
Yeah, I mean, this was what a treat for the men's volleyball community, fans. I mean, this was the best volleyball I have seen probably ever. And those first two sets were out. I mean, they were just out of this world, right? I think early on, Brad had mentioned what was the best set of the tournament. Set two was unreal. And you could tell, I mean, the broadcasters were talking about it. The friends of mine texting, talking with different people that were watching this match. I mean, this was really, really a treat for our community, and just a testament to how far our sport has grown. And you give your hat off for sure to UCLA. They played absolutely fantastic and did some things down the stretch. I feel like these guys covered most of it. But if you've been with us on this podcast along the way, we predicted that these two teams would be here. And would be in this moment, and for sure they rose to the occasion and showed us what hard dedication and hard work really looks like. And to see these guys perform at that level and to do it on that stage was just fantastic. Really, really awesome.
One of the best plays I saw was Ito did Dimitri on the cross court bomb at 80 miles an hour plus or something, straight up in the air, and then get set again and get a kill out of it. I remember
that. I remember that exact play, Dan.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys this. I mean, they were toe to toe. And if you look at the final box, 10 aces to 3, but was there an element of Hawaii maybe getting worn out in the third and fourth because of the difficulty of the serving by UCLA? Because, they'd been going toe to toe for the first two sets. And if that keeps coming at you, how does that wear and tear on your receivers?
This is such a game of momentum, Rob. And, when the pressure is tight and you've got so many opportunities to be in a position to score, and then the other team goes on a serving run, and now most of your sets are coming from 20 feet or beyond, and your hitters are just in situations where it's really difficult to kill the ball, it becomes demoralizing, and trying to continue to bounce back when UCLA is putting that type of service pressure. And then in the reverse, as soon as you get an opportunity to score, like Dan said, Gooch and Champlin are getting you in perfect in-system balls, and they've got a middle attack that is incredibly effective. I mean, Merrick was just lights out down the stretch. Some of his swings were over the block in the middle of the court. I mean, just completely untouchable. It was it's tough. It's tough when the serve receive isn't there, and the service pressure is that strong.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing we talk about, like the novice fans watching sometimes. Why are they missing so many serves? Well, like if you don't find the pressure, then you don't put them in a position to score where you need to. You know what I mean? And so if I just serve lollipops over and they're hitting at a 800 clip on me, it gets really difficult. And so, but then on the flip side, if you're missing all your serves all the time, which we saw with like Penn State going into the fifth, then all of a sudden you kind of open the door for the other team and it swings momentum like Theo talked about. So it's this real fine line when you're training, trying to get guys confident with good pressure to create momentum. And we saw maybe some of the best teams in the country doing it for a couple of days. And you saw some execute and then you saw some didn't. And I think that's where your winner comes out.
Yeah. Well, we now have a national champion, UCLA, after it's an 11-year stint of without one. Sprague gets his first at UCLA after his last one in 2012 at UC Irvine. And I have a feeling we have to do an overflow one. I feel like there are a bunch of things we need to recap on the season and also overflow conversation from this week due to our time constraints. But you guys down with that for next week? I mean, now we got on public record. So but yeah, so hey, it's Brad Rothschild of UC San Diego, Jay Hossack of George Mason, Theo Edwards of CSUN, and Dan Fran of Lewis. Thank you again this week. Sorry to cut it short, but fans will have one more episode. So that means we'll have the After Dark episode because, when I throw the After Dark on there, that boosts listenership by 2,000%. So, all right, gentlemen, have a good week.
Thanks for listening to College Volleyball Weekly. Be sure to follow Rob Aspero at the Rob on the Mic on Instagram and at Rob on the Mic on Twitter.